Makeathon organizers for inviting me. Happy to be here. My name's Nathan. I've been doing web development for a long time. So I'm happy to talk with you guys and see what you're up to with what you're working on. I think part of the exciting thing for me is getting to learn about all the exciting ideas you have and what you're doing to get them moving. I suppose some of your comrades might be at the game tonight, so there's not going to be quite as many people here. How was traffic getting in? Anybody get stuck anywhere? It's bad. It's bad. Yeah, we left extra early and we still barely made it, so I'm glad that worked. Well, yeah, if you just come on in, come down to the front. You don't have to wait to the back. Make sure you've signed in if you haven't already, so you get credit for attendance. And yeah, today we're going to talk about designing for screens. But I'm curious for you guys, you're all at different stages of your ideas. And I want to know, sort of for those of you who are, have the seed of an idea or you already have like a working prototype, why don't you share with me some of where you are so far? So how many of you guys have actually have like a design? It may not be like a working prototype, but you already have like screens or like sketched ideas. And is that digital or is it just like pen and paper? Where are you? Digital?
Yeah.
And what tools you're using right now?
I'm using like I'm doing UX design, like that's my
cool.
profession after graduation. So all of it's in Sketch and
cool.
Some in Principle and in Vision.
Excellent, yeah. So that's definitely a pro workflow for sure, yeah. What else? So the folks that have some like digital, go ahead, yeah, what are you using?
We're using Figma.
Okay, cool.
Just basics, yeah.
Yeah, so this is familiar to you already then, all right? Some of this stuff we'll cover today, that's good. And then I saw your hand was up as well. Yeah, what are you using?
Well, we jump right in.
Oh, wow. So you just jump right into the code, the prototyping before even doing the...
Yeah, we just wanted the functionality. We work for UI.
Cool. Well, so the thing about being an entrepreneur is you have a lot of decisions to make with a startup, and part of the thing is what do you do yourself and what do you have somebody else do? And that's sort of the perpetual question, because on the one hand, you don't have any money, so anything that you can do yourself, you will do. But on the other hand, there are things that other people do really well and really fast, and so you sort of have to be judicious about spending that time. And I don't know there's ever like a really good answer, like you always know which it is. But you got to be careful because if you take on too much, you can burn yourself out. So I'm sort of a proponent of if you don't need to learn it, don't do it. Or if you can have someone else do it, do it. But the flip side of that is you want to be in control of your own destiny. And so you can't sort of be dependent on somebody to do your design, to do your code. But you're also not a coder, you're an entrepreneur. So these are some of the things that are in the mix as we talk about actual design work here, is trying to figure some of that stuff out and decide on what's right for you. So I wanted to talk about designing for screens because for two reasons, really. One is for most of you that have a business idea, there's going to be some app component, some web component, and whether that's like a native app, like on a mobile device, like Android, iOS, or whether it's a web app, we're just talking screens. Of course, there's other kinds of design. As you all know, there's graphic design, print design, poster design, but screen design is sort of its own beast. For those, does anybody have any background in like print design or anything like that? Like have you like done flyers or whatever? What kind of stuff have you done? So a ton of experience, it sounds like. Well, Dino, can you tell me one thing that's different between print design and screen design? There's like one key difference I'm thinking of in particular.
For screen design, you always have to think about different screen sizes.
Exactly, it's a moving target. And so you never really know how someone is consuming that, whether they're on an iPhone and is it an iPhone SE? Is it a 6? Is it an 8? Is it a 10? And there's all different sizes, and God knows Android has 200,000 different screen sizes, and you try your best to do it. And then of course you could be sitting at your laptop and then you've got the full size screen there. And so, how do you sort of navigate all these things? And so part of what's nice about Figma, and we'll talk about this a little bit, is that unlike some traditional tools like Photoshop, Illustrator, or Sketch, it's actually I should say like Sketch, unlike these other ones, it's devoted specifically to screen design and making a big difference. I use Sketch for many years, so I'm a big fan. I've switched recently to Figma, not for a really good reason. I was having some performance issues with Sketch with like really giant files, and so I like Figma. Seems, man.
I'll talk to you.
Yeah. No, and it's crazy to me. Like they built like an entire like Photoshop or whatever, basically just in a browser, and it just sort of blows my mind. That, I mean, even 5 years ago, this would just be sort of the most bananas thing. But one thing I really like about Figma is you can do collaborative design. So like multiple people can be working on the same thing at the same time, which if you've ever used like Google Docs or whatever, like you're used to that. But for a design tool, that's sort of unusual, but that's fun. And so I saw here about, this is our sort of agenda for today. And so we're gonna talk a little about web apps just to get a sense of everyone's coming from like a different perspective of what sort of that means. And you need to have some idea of the terminology if you're gonna be successful sort of communicating and articulating like your pitch, your value proposition. We'll look at Figma. In particular, we're gonna look at a few UI rules. One of my favorite articles on design ever written, I thought to myself, how can we do this in a way that's really useful for you guys? Because I can't assign homework in advance. So we have to do something that's like really simple and easy. And I think that this one sort of article, the 7 rules for UI design, is gonna probably make you better than 90% of most people that are designing for screens just from this one article, which I quite like. And then by the end, I want you guys to actually have time to build a working prototype using Figma. And whether you use Figma or don't use Figma doesn't matter. The idea that you can sort of capture your ideas and then send them to somebody who might be doing your build or might be doing your design or your coding or whatever. Again, that idea that you don't need to be dependent on like trying to explain something and someone does it, you give them feedback. That back and forth wastes a lot of time and it can be really challenging. So you don't have to be like totally crazy good designer. Even just like rough ideas in a prototype can really make the difference. And so we'll look at that together and make sure you guys are comfortable with that. So looking like about web apps, like what are we talking about? Like what does it mean when you say about web apps? Oh, actually, no, before we do that, I'm gonna show you guys a little thing. So I found this little video. And you guys all know in Cali for the curriculum, you have to do like, yeah, you do customer interviews, right? And what's the point of customer interviews? You guys tell me. Go ahead.
To understand the user and better understand like their pain points, their frustrations, and how to like craft their experience so that it's not like it's not just your own like preconceived notions of what the product should be.
Yeah, exactly. And whether
We're not the end user, and we're not consuming it.
well, that's the thing, and you. No matter what you think you know about your user, you probably don't know it. I don't need to hammer that point home too much. I'm sure that people are doing the same thing, but you are not your user, and that can be hard because as entrepreneurs, you're sort of scratching your own itches. So something that you saw in the world that you wanted to make, but maybe you're like one of 3 people who do that or whatever. And so part of it is making sure you understand because you may not have any idea that what you're making anybody wants at all. And so this I thought was a terrific example of that. It's like, sure, we don't need to interview our users. Like we know exactly what they want. And so you see this really nice design playground here, and there's all these kids playing in some slides, and guess what they're using? Not a single one is using the slide itself. They're just, I guess they're having more fun on the ground here. My favorite one's coming up, this kid here, face first. So yeah, it's just amazing to me that they're just having such a good old time, and somebody went to a lot of trouble making this playground here, and nobody wants to use it. So you don't want this to be your product. You want to make sure that you have good data on what your customers want and need, so that's fun. So just really quick about when we talk about web apps, what is it that we mean? And for some of you, this is going to be basic, and some of you, this might be helpful terminology. But what would you say is sort of the principal distinction between a web app and a website, like just like a regular website? What is that crucial distinction there? Or some of the characteristics that make them different? Go ahead. That's a good question. I mean, you could say, okay, so then you could say that like an app that you have on your phone is definitely something you download versus a web app that you use just in your browser. So that's a really good distinction, actually, yeah. First of all, if you say you're going to do a web app for your business, or you're going to do an app, are you talking about something that you download to your device, or is it just something you just go to a website and use on your phone? But then like how would a web app, let's say like Gmail, be different from like the NewYorkTimes.com? If you're just talking not the kind you download, just the kind that you go to a website for, what's the main difference there? Go ahead.
I think a website is more of a hub for different like pieces of information and communication, whereas an app is something that performs a function for you.
Yeah, and you could say that the communication hub that you're saying, you're largely just consuming information, like you're just reading information, whereas with an app you might be reading and also what? Like entering data, like you're taking photos, for Uber, you're like putting in your location and it's finding your information, whatever. So that's sort of a fundamental distinction here. And we can also say then that sort of segues nicely into web versus native. Some of you are going to do like iOS or Android apps that you download, and that's great, and also has a whole sort of order of magnitude more complexity than just, you could just put something on a website and it's ready tomorrow. There's no like, you don't have to get it approved in the App Store, you don't have to download it, you don't have to cost anything, whatever. If someone visits that website the next time, if you've already pushed changes and made updates, they're just live automatically. You don't have to download a new version or update or whatever. So there's a lot of advantages to doing like web apps versus native apps, but for your business, both are probably going to be important. Again, just some terminology here. So if you're talking like a native app on your phone, this is something where you have to have code that compiles and it's submitted. But when it comes to sort of your web app that might be something that you visit on a just like in a web browser or something, then domain, you guys all know, is something that you may have registered. Anybody like have a name for their business? They've already registered a domain so far? Is that too early? Is it like early stages yet? What's yours? Spa.app? Spot. Oh, that's fun. That was still available? Okay, so SP0T. Yeah, right. It's going to be hard. Anybody else have domains they've already registered? Are you guys mostly like phone apps, like mobile native apps? Yeah, okay. So then you'll have to have a marketing site though too, because people have to find out about it and learn about it, and maybe you're going to interact with them some way that's separate them. So you actually have this whole separate thing where it's on the one hand I have my app code, but I need some way to like a marketing site. And that's again talking about just like a regular site. Maybe it's not an app or whatever, but these are all things that you have to consider. Front end versus back end. Again, this is more like web, which is my expertise. That's where I'm coming from. But the reason I bring that up is because you look at something like React Native, which Jeff, right? So React Native is a way that you use web programming to compile like an iOS or an Android app. And so it's like there's some blending there between like if you know how to do web apps, you can actually make iPhone apps out of them. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but that CRUD there is you're going to hear a lot. And fundamentally, every app, no matter what you have, you're all doing the same thing. You're creating information, you're reading information, you're updating information, you're deleting information. Create, read, update, delete. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're Uber or Flickr or Airbnb or whatever, like you're putting information into a system, you're updating records, you're pulling information out of a system. Every single app on the whole planet is just the same 4 processes. And so you have to basically design your screens to accommodate those user actions. They're going to read things, they're going to write things, they're going to update things they've already made, and they're going to delete them. And so your screens that you're making reflect those 4 actions. Holy Trinity I put on there is HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Again, not needing to go into too much detail here because it sounds like you guys are mostly interested in the iOS apps and stuff. But is anybody at the React Native one this morning, the first session? Anybody go to that one? Any computer science folks in here? Do you guys have a background in coding? Got 1, 2, 3, a couple, 4, 5. Okay, 6. Yeah, that's excellent. So you guys, you have a jump start then for anybody who's going to be entrepreneur thinking about app is the fact that you can write it yourself. That's not the case for a lot of people. And so part of what we want to do today is say, how can you have like some quick and dirty ways to get through some of this stuff? So I want you guys to pull up, for those of you who have laptops, looks like everybody here with access. There's a bit.ly link. That's the easiest way I could think to communicate this. I don't have a way to broadcast a link to all of your devices, so you'll have to just read it off. But it looks like 1.1, lowercase I, 4, capital EY 2. And this is something we're going to look at. This is sort of the foundation of what we're talking about today. I should make sure. Are you going to put that on? Let me see if that works. Does that pull up? Is that seven rules? Good. So this is great. We're not going to read all this. There's 2 parts. The second part is linked in that article, so you'll see it. But there's basically 7 things. This guy, Eric Kennedy, is a fantastic designer, really great educator. And he wrote this article. I read it a couple of years ago. And I thought, I had never seen anybody just sort of condense rules into this designing for screens into just a handful of principles. And it's like, yeah, of course there's more than this. But if you just sort of understand conceptually these 7 ideas, you're going to be a much better designer than when you started. And I love that he talks about, he's like, there's a lot of people who probably going to give me a hassle for this. And in the beginning of the article, he talks about, he's like, on the one hand, you have, what is it, judo, I guess, which is like a martial art that's like really elegant and refined and over many years. And it's about like flow and balance and harmony. He's like, this is not judo. He's like, this is Krav Maga. Do you guys know Krav Maga? Have you ever heard of this before? What is Krav Maga? It is a kind of martial arts. It was developed in Israel by like the security forces, and his whole thing is like, there's no elegance to it. It's like stick a pencil in somebody's eye and run. Just get out of there. It's like dirty, it's crude or whatever. So it's like, this is sort of the Krav Maga of design articles. I'm not here to give you a whole education. I'm just going to give you the quick and dirty tools to make sure that you know everything you need to know to sort of get through it. So let's look at these 7 here, and then we'll have a chance to work on them together. We'll do the part 1 here. So his first 3 rules in part 1 is light comes from the sky. I know this sounds really silly, but there's a handful of ways that screen design, when you're looking at something that's well designed, like an app or even just like any kind of graphic that you're designing, the closer that we sort of mimic nature, the more realistic and professional it looks. And it's sort of hard to think, like, why are some designs like really attractive and easy to use? And actually, those are 2 different things. Like, it could be attractive or easy to use, but not both at the same time. But how do you get something that is like both attractive and easy to use? And part of it is some of these principles here. So light comes from the sky. So in general, when you see things that can be acted on, again, talking about any kind of app, you have to have some user input of some kind. And so all of the controls that we use, whether it's like buttons or form fields or whatever, they have some sort of tactility to them. And even though we talk about flat design versus skeuomorphic design, whatever, even still, things that look like they can have presence to them and weight to them triggers a person to want to act on it. He also suggests black and white first. Forget the color, just basic wireframing. Just get your grayscale. It's going to save you a lot of trouble. Just get your ideas out, do your blocking, get a sense of layout. Finally, double your white space. Like, when in doubt, double your white space. If you're thinking like, is this enough room between these components or these elements? Triple it, quadruple it. You probably still don't have enough room for it to look like really good. So this is just the first one we'll talk about. Again, just really, really basic stuff. But what I like about these principles is that they're just quick and dirty. And it's just like, anytime you're designing something, understand why people do the things they do. So he's looking at this like button example here in this first one. And you can see there's a couple things to note about it, is that not only is there a gradient on the button from top to bottom. So for the very top of the blue to the bottom, it goes from light to dark. So like a very subtle difference, like light blue to dark blue. And why would you have something lighter at the top and darker at the bottom when you're designing an element that's intended? Well, go ahead. Because light comes from the sky. Exactly right, yeah. And he gives an example. Do you see in the photo of the girl with the flashlight under her face? You guys scroll down a little bit on that. Do you see it? Oh, you don't think it's okay. He said basically when you invert that, things look really creepy. It's like when you're trying to scare somebody at like a ghost story or something like that. So basically that's the idea. You can see also in this example, there's like a darker blue like at the very, very bottom of the button. And he sort of zooms in, you can see that, in addition to the shadow. So there's like a very subtle shadow here. And again, these are like simple things, but just light to dark, give things weight. And so again, it looks like something. And then the push here, the thing about designing for screens is you're not just doing like a static image either, because if you have a button and you're acting on it to the degree that the user knows, yes, this has been acted on, there's like active state, there's disabled state, there's all kinds of states that you have to design for. And that's sort of beyond the scope of this, but these are all things to consider as far as like what makes for really good screen design. So he gives another example here. I guess that's what, but the example he gives in the article there's like an old iOS 6 screenshot there, and it's like a real old iPhone or something, but you can sort of see there's a good example. He does it the same way, where he takes it and he looks it from the side, and he says like, if you actually were to take this and see how the light hits it, then you'll give a good sense for like designing screen interfaces. So that's just his first thing, is light comes from the sky. So when you're thinking of designing elements. His number 2 is black and white first. So you guys, I'm sure, have all had experience of wireframes, but you just don't need to really mess with too much color detail. Part of a rough prototype, and again, that's what we're doing today, is just getting your ideas out. You just want to make sure that you have the flow down. They start here, they might log in. Maybe there's a failure of login and you have to present some kind of image, and that's a different screen. Or maybe they successful login and they go to a different screen. And then from there, what are your options? And I can go to several screens from there. So again, these are all things that you have to map out as you're just thinking through your app, whether it's, again, web app or iOS or Android app, it doesn't matter. You have to sort of think of these things. This is like a full-size web app, of course, but or a website. But the principles are the same, is you have to think about interactivity and user flow, all things that are going on. But start here, just make it easy on yourself. And then this is also, again, just scroll down in the article, he mentions this too. His third thing is on this is double your white space. So he looks in this example here at the left is just like a standard window, like a text edit window on Mac. And it just like it hurts your eyes to look at. Like just the line lengths run from side to side. There's like not a lot of space between the paragraphs. There's not like a margin around it. It's just hard to read. Whereas you look at this sort of design here where I think he measured it in the article. He says the space for like post-rock and pop, like it's I think 2 or 3 times the amount of whatever the height of the letters are. It's like 3 times that, the space between them. So just in general, like whatever your spacing is, you need to make things like really easy. And again, these are sort of like quick and dirty. This is not like a whole fundamental theory in screen design. It's just like a handful of basic principles that as you're going through, keep these things in mind, and you're going to be more successful in your screen design. So that said, I want to just start here with this link. I created a little sort of Figma tutorial just for folks. Now you can sort of get your feet wet. Some of you have experience already. Did anybody seeing the name of this workshop like look at Figma or try it out ahead of time, or were curious about like what it was we were going to be doing? Or is this the first time you've ever seen it? You can use it right in your browser, or you can download an app. Here's the app version that I have. And so the one that link that I just sent you takes you here, so it should look like this. I'll go back to the screen in a second. So put that in there and see if it comes up. It might prompt you. You'll be first off as a guest. I mean, you'll need to create an account. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do that now too. We'll take a second. Well, that's not the right one at all. Let's try it again. 2B, capital B, lowercase z, B, capital H, A, X. So it's possible I got this wrong. Where it's supposed to take you here. Is anybody else having trouble with this link? No, it's working for you guys? You may have to create an account, I don't know. But yeah, so come here, create your account. If you haven't already, just take a second, just username, password, or whatever. But the first thing that I'll just show you here, just as a quick thing, and you can zoom. I want to just get you're familiar with the interface here. Oops, that's not right. What's going on here? Let's do that again. There we go. So I believe it's Shift 0 will bring you in. Yeah, so Shift 0 brings you right into 100%. And the thing to know about Figma, first of all, there's a lot of tutorials on this. Again, this is way beyond the scope of this brief workshop, but there's a ton of really great articles and tutorials and videos on the Figma site. So anything that you'd really want to know about the basics, you're going to find there. So we'll just cover some of the highlights here. But in general, this is like 5 or 6 different things here that you want to know, and that we are going to be looking at the demo and the prototype for later on. So this is what we're looking at. But yeah, just get familiar with the interface here. So you'll see for this demo, the Figma is unlike some other kinds of things. Like if you've ever designed like Illustrator or Photoshop, you start by creating your canvas, and it might be like an 8.5 by 11 or a brochure or whatever. But on Figma, it's just an infinite canvas. Sketch is like that as well. So there's not really any boundaries at all. You just create boxes and you put them places. So in this case, I just created some like sample designs here. Well, these I took from the Figma help file, but you can just see here. So up here, my basics are move and scale. So am I moving something or resizing it? We'll get to frame in a second, but I just want to show you. So basic things, and any kind of software that you've ever used. You know, there's nothing rocket science here. Mostly all screen design is just making boxes and typing text. That's like 99% of all that you're doing. But the idea that you can sort of create your own adventure here. So essentially with this, that's just a box. In Figma, there's this concept of frames that I'll get to in a second, but there's rectangle, line, all your sort of basic shapes. So if you're going to make any kind of arrow here, and then, of course, just all the basics you can see. If you hold Shift, you'll constrain. And then, so these are sort of your basic tools. There's some stuff up here, the design, prototype, the code. I don't really use the code that much, but we'll talk about both the design and prototype. So anything that you've got selected over here, you can control its qualities over here. So you've got fill, stroke, effects, export. Anybody not familiar with some of these basic ideas, like stroke and fill, those are pretty like standard. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I didn't have a question about that, but I think
Go ahead.
the link that you sent us might be a view only.
It might be view only. OK, it should. That's a good question. So I think that is a fine question. So I've got enable link. So public link access is disabled. Maybe that's the problem. Anybody with the link can view. Can edit. How do I? Well, I could certainly invite you guys one by one, but I don't know why. Yeah, I can. It's just really long. Yeah, I mean, I can show you.
Faster than that maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, I mean, here's what we're looking at.
Actually, send it to me and I can send it out to everyone.
Okay, that would be. Okay.
Make it on the email. Well, that would go to everyone though, huh?
Yeah, what's the best? That was one thing I was trying to solve, is how do I like get a link to you guys? Anybody know some quick? Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, I sure can. Here, I'll just do it right here. I can look better. So I've got the link. We will open bit.ly. So I thought that's what I had. Shorten. So try this one here. Can you guys read that? 2n1pfxg. Shouldn't be read-only, but because I think it defaults to, if you're just a guest, like if you had a design and you were sharing it with someone, they don't have to create a Figma account to look at it, but they need a Figma account if they want to edit it, obviously. So that's one thing.
Can you leave out the link again?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and make it bigger here. So 2 capital N, 1, lowercase p, capital F, capital X, lowercase g. Still view only? Okay, well, that's okay. This is not necessarily like about like what we're going to cover on this is just about reading it, and then you can just create a new one and you can play around. What's that?
You can just choose duplicate to your draft.
Aha, yes, thank you. So so when you have something that's view only, you can say, and where's the link for it? You can say like copy this to my, no?
Duplicate to your draft. Is there in the middle?
Download it to your drafts, yeah. That's what we want. Oh, wow, how did I get all these people in here? Go, all can view. Oh, wait, here we go. Ah, we got it. Oh, I can only have 2 editors. Oh, okay, this is my free account here. So I can see you guys in here. Where's that link you said, like download it to my drafts? Where was that?
And there's a drop down.
Near the title?
The web version is there.
There's a sample file up top, and it says view only, and if you click it down,
The drop down thing.
As the owner, I may not have it. Yeah, so can you guys go ahead and say that again? So
there's like a file, a little title at the top that says sample file, and if you click the drop down menu, it says duplicate to your draft.
So try that. Yeah, do you guys see if you click on the title, there's a drop down that says duplicate to my draft. So any file that's like read edit or that's view only, you can just save to your own and then it's yours. And you can do whatever you want with it. Anybody not able to save it to your own? You guys have it? Yes, sure. You surely can. So that is right here. Can you see that? 2n1 lowercase p, capital F, capital X, lowercase g. I considered even like making a Slack just for tonight or whatever so I could throw links at you guys, but I was like, that's probably more work. It'd probably be easier just to read off of bit.ly or whatever, but so yeah, try pulling that up and then copy it to your own, and then you can sort of tear it apart, but there's some fun. Anybody still need this link here, or should I jump back over? So yeah, if you can't edit this one, that's okay. You're welcome to tool around in your own. It's more just about getting you familiar with the interface. So again, you don't necessarily need to edit this file, but you'll be able to copy it to your own. So I'm just going to like tool around here a little bit. I can see Akshay is right here. Oh, hey, we're dancing. But the idea is that if you have like multiple team members, you guys could even be separated in space. And if you wanted to collaborate on your design at the same time, you guys can actually do. So again, I can't give you permission in this moment here, but like you would normally be able to click an individual thing here, and you can see this is my little layer panel over here, and you've got your individual layers here. And again, for any time that you've done any sort of drawing software, it's very, like whether you use Sketch or Photoshop or Figma, sort of the same principles emerge. So on the left-hand side, you've got your layers, you've got your tools, and then you've got your sort of like information panel here on the right. But I just want to cover some basics here, just so you guys, like the goal again is for you to leave tonight being able to make an actual prototype that you could send a link to someone. And what's kind of cool too is that they have this ability here when you do the presentation mode. I'll actually show you what I'm going to have you guys. So over here, I created sort of a silly a silly, my own app here called Glamper. You guys know what glamping is? Has anybody heard of that? What's glamping? Go ahead.
It's like when you go camping, but like you bring like everything with you, so it's basically just like normal living.
Yeah, well, so either that, or which is what we do when camping, but if you want to go camping but you don't want to bring anything at all, you just want the people that have it to take care of everything for you, it's like you show up and it's like there's a really soft bed and like there's food and towels and everything and like really nice. So it's sort of like camping for people who don't like camping. The idea that it's like really, really basically high-end glamorous camping, that's where they get the name. Anyway, so what's fun here is that I created my little app and I just show you, this is something that I just did in, I don't know, like a couple hours or whatever. I made my little logo here or whatever, just a couple of basic shapes. And then again, I'll show you just how we're making like individual pieces here. And then as you zoom out a little bit, yeah. And then what's neat about this is, so you see I've got one view here, and then another view here, and then another view here. And why I have these different views, sort of what this all boils down to is, if I come over here and go to presentation mode, then this is something that I could send to you and you could pull it up on your phone and it would look just like an app on your phone, like right now. So for example, if I come over here, see a question? And I see this and I click on it, it blinks at me. So the idea is that if you're trying to figure out what to do, this will tell you that, hey, this is a region that's clickable. So you just basically design your little app with shapes. And again, these are just boxes and text. So when it really comes down to it, screen design is sort of just boxes and text and maybe images. And how you overlay text on images, but it's like the same things over and over again. So anyway, so I can click login here, and so I'm sort of making it look like, again, if this were on your phone and you tapped on that little login button, it would make it look right here. And what's cool too is you can even do a couple of things that are neat with Figma is you can take something and fix it. So you see how that navigation bar sort of stays in place as I scroll down, and then also the fact that you can have images out of frame that scroll naturally. So again, something that I'm just doing like a quick mock-up here, but, and these are actual photos that I took from glamping.com. These are all places you can rent if you guys want to do some high-end camping. There's one in New Zealand that just look really like a lot of fun here. And this one is a yurt, but it looked like a turtle, so I called it a yurtle, I guess anyway, but Helena, Montana. So in here, you can see, same deal, you can do like little overlays, which is part of the responsivity of the prototype. So you can see I click on my little X here, I got my little menu, and then I can do home, and it takes me right back to here, or if I click on here, it takes me back to here. So same deal, I can just click somewhere, and they all blink at me, and that sort of tells me like what are the clickable elements. And so I'll come back here and say, oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, close that. And then this one, you click on this, and it like takes you to a view about this particular property or whatever. So this is really simple, and again, I knocked this out in like a couple hours or whatever, just for fun. But the idea is that you could just take whatever your idea is and make a prototype that you could send. Go ahead.
I know why the art museum app does not have this.
Yeah, good question. So that was more. So I was trying to do this in stages, and I've sort of gotten ahead of myself. So that one was more just about here. Let's look at the Figma interface and just know like what things are what. So, and then the next stage was going to be like, okay, now let's look at a prototype. So I sort of just got ahead of myself. But you're right that would be a really nice candidate. And that actually would be kind of a fun thing for just an exercise would be to take something like this and turn it into, like you could just as easily in yours, you could take a, for example, if I were going to come over here, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I could go to prototype. I'll click on this login button here. Oh, not that. I want the login button there. And then I have my prototype over here, and I can say, okay, I want this to come to here. And it's just like really simple. And then now when I click on that, it just takes me to this page. I mean, it's just like the simplest thing ever. And then there's a lot more here that you can do with how do you want it? Do you want it to be like a dissolve? Do you want it to just be instant? So you can sort of tweak this, and you can sort of get the interaction. Like maybe you don't want it just to switch right away. You want it to sort of fade or something. You can play around with that even in the prototype. Go ahead.
I'm pretty used to using Photoshop for design. Would it be possible for me, if I wanted to like design the like Photoshop some way, would it be possible to then add functionality through this to like buttons that I put on there visually?
100%. So you could take your designs from Photoshop, even if they were like one whole image, like not even sliced, just like literally a single JPEG or whatever, PNG. You could drop it in here, and then you could create a little window over your button, and then just make that be a prototype and then send that off to someone. So you don't have to use Figma to make the images to still use it for the prototype. I like it because I'm just used to it and it's easy, and once you use it a little bit, it's much simpler and faster and doesn't cost anything either. But
It's like for a button, I can just like outline an area where I want that button to be or turn it in.
yeah, and in fact, now that I think about it, yeah, you'd have to have it with no fill or no stroke. So it's basically like an invisible button that you're putting on there, or you could do everything but the buttons and then just do the buttons in Figma and then that kind of thing too. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways I think to do that. Yeah, that's a really good question. But yeah, so the main thing here is just I wanted to get you comfortable with. So you see, like right here, I'm just going to go through these really fast. You'll see so effects, and why I chose that for number 1, I can't remember, but it's basically just like a neat way to see. So you can see here it says double click the layout, and then we say background image is what gets selected, and then you see over here, go back to design. So you see here the image is this fill here, and then it gives me information like I can crop it differently. I can change the exposure and contrast of my image. I can change the saturation, these kinds of things here, make it all the way grayscale or something. So I mean, even Figma is not really like necessarily like a photo editing. You still have like some pretty good tools for using that. And then over here you can see how it says inner shadow and layer blur. So that's sort of what this number 1 is about. You'll see that it's blurred right here. And actually, I'll just turn off, I'll get the color back there. And then you see layer blur right here. This little eyeball here is how you can get rid of something that you've added. And you can see that it's by default, it's a sharp image. And you just pulled this off of, forget like Flickr Commons or something like that, I forget. And so that's something that's pretty common. But you see that a lot in designs lately. And so Figma sort of is jumping on the bandwagon for this kind of stuff. You can add more effects. So inner shadow is in here. If you wanted to like make it even crazier, you can go jump that up to 9. And then I guess you can't really see that super well, but you can turn it off. You can keep adding more effects as you go, just a little plus button here. And then you can save them here if you want. You can create little effect styles. And then like let's say you have a certain combination of like drop shadow or filter or blur or whatever. And you have like 4 or 5 different things all together. You can save it as a style. And then that way when you have another image, you can just click it and it applies all 5 of those filters at the same time. So that's one thing. Just again, talk about images. A lot of apps, and this 7 UI design principle, the first one of part 2 is like, how do you put text on photos? And that's sort of like 90% of what you're doing when it comes to UI design. And so here's a good example of like text on photos or whatever. So fonts, again, what's neat is when you're selecting a font, you can see here that if you want to enable it, you can automatically have not only all the fonts on your computer, but all Google fonts that are free at fonts.google.com. And again, that's sort of overwhelming. So there's really just like a handful that you probably want to use when it comes to user interface design. There's really just like 2 or 3 that you could probably stick with, and then that's fine. Like you don't have to get crazy with, like you're never going to use like Comic Sans or something. But like Roboto is a good choice. Obviously that's native Android. Work Sans I'm quite fond of, which again is a free web font here. But you can just see that all this stuff here, again, this is just, I mean, this looks like really professional, but it's just text boxes and then different kinds of contrast. And one of the 7 principles we'll get to is like, how do you contrast text in meaningful ways? Here's a button here that's sort of the example of what we talked about. So do you see there's like, I'm going to zoom in a little here, and there's a drop shadow on this guy. And I believe, is this a solid color or this is, no, it's a solid fill. So we could instead maybe make a gradient. Like we said, if light comes from the top, so we could say, let's have this lighter red and then this one instead be the same red. Oops. So let me turn off this. Make it 100%. So if I wanted to make this lighter at the top and darker at the bottom, then I can just do this. So it's sort of subtle. Can you guys see the difference here? Here's flat, and then here's adding a darker red towards the bottom. And then it gives you a little sense. It also makes the text easier to read. Gives you a little sense of depth there. And then also there's a little drop shadow on this guy, which you can see right here. If I turn that off, it's just solid white. But again, light comes from above. That's the main thing here, is that really subtle differences. And that's a pretty subtle shadow. I would probably like maybe go down to 2 on that blur, and maybe 2 on that. You can darken it even more if you want. But so again, little things like that. What's neat about Figma too is that people have a lot of their designs available, and you can pull them in and sort of inspect them and see like what are some of the things that people do that are really cool. Moving on, so vector networks. This I'm not going to belabor too much, but just basically, if you need to draw things, you can use this pen tool here, and you can sort of just make your lines. And and then you can make any old shape you want. And then once you have that shape, then you can fill it with whatever color you want. So there I just filled it with that color right there. And then what's sort of neat too is when you've got your, this is what it says here, select any, if you hold the command key, which would be, I guess, control for Windows. So if I sort of put it like right here, then I can make it curved too, which is fun. So you can use this to draw any old thing you want to. Again, like it's pretty sophisticated what you're able to do with it. I like to zoom in right here. Use the Z key and you can zoom in, and you can see it's just so instant. Like this kind of thing in a lot of software would just bring your computer to its knees. Like your fans would kick in like it's a jet engine or something. But for some reason with Figma, they're able to basically get. I can just zoom in here like 10,000% or whatever. And then here's like a little icon again somebody made. I didn't make this one. But we can sort of just grab these little points, and I can sort of futz with them. You can draw little icons, and if I hold the command key, I can make them curved. Anyway, just again, this is all high-level stuff. I want to just give you a quick walkthrough of the interface so that when you're making your prototype in a little bit, you guys have some familiarity with it. So. Groups and artboards, this again is sort of similar to how you'd expect things to be. If you have, like in this case, let me click on this. So down here, there's a little image gallery group, and it includes just a bunch of stuff. And it can just be handy to keep track, because once you have some really sophisticated screen design, you've got thousands of layers all over the place. And so one thing is keeping your layers really tidy. I'm not going to go too much into this. The one thing that I do really want to sort of point out that's different from a lot of things is how constraints work. And this is the point that was made earlier about like what makes screen design versus print design different. And you don't know exactly what your sort of canvas will look like and like what sort of viewport people will have. And so one thing that Figma does really well, and again, I'm going to leave this for the tutorials on the Figma website for more depth later, but essentially what you're able to do here is constraints let you decide when you have something that changes size, what should the things inside of it do? So, and I think in this example, like, let's see, so it actually says to see, select the group by selecting the entire layout on the right, shop label, and then choose between iPhone 6 and iPhone, and then, oh, iPhone 8. Oh, where'd my layer go? Let me just grab the whole thing, see if this works. There you go. So this is what I want you guys to see. So what do you notice about the Art Museum logo in the top left corner and the little hamburger menu in the top right corner? And then even the image of the watch in the middle. What characteristics do you see them doing? Yeah, like as I change the size of my viewport, because maybe I'm going from like phone to iPad or desktop or whatever, what are the things doing here? You can make the image be sort of pegged so that always the spacing on either side is always the same. So you see how the image here of the watch just stays in the middle, and then I have the shop here staying in the center, and then Art Museum, no matter how big or small this gets, it always stays pegged to the top left corner. And then this menu stays pegged to the top right corner. So this is a function of constraints. And that's where if I click on this guy, you can see here, do you see how it says constraints left and right, top and bottom with these little blue X's? That means I want always the space on all sides to remain the same as I resize the viewport. And again, this is something that you can go into a lot of depth about because you'll be designing for a lot of screen sizes. But you're going to want to know, like if I'm looking at it in portrait versus landscape versus iPad versus desktop versus whatever. And that's more like web stuff but you still need to know this for like, because like an iPhone 8 Plus versus like an iPhone SE are dramatically different as far as the sizes there. So like for this one right here, if we were to change this to the constraints, if we just said like right on this guy, then as I change the size of this, you'll see what happens to my little watch image. I'm going to resize this here. You guys see that? You see the difference that I made? Now it's staying fixed along the right side. And that's because I chose this versus if I go left and right, then I have to choose this whole thing again. course, now it's like pegged to that right side. And then I can do, you could also do scale left and right. So that will actually change the size of it as I resize. Or it's supposed to anyway. Let's see this one. But yeah, that's just, again, this is sort of just like a high-level walkthrough. For those of you who are designing your assets here, whether that's screens or images or logos or whatever, and then you need to bring them into whatever your build system is for your either React Native, or you're doing Xcode for iOS, or whatever your like Java runtime environment is for Android, whatever. You'll need to take your assets and export them, and so you can do that. This is pretty typical for Sketch, for Photoshop. You can slice things down here. You can say export this whole thing here, and then I want it to be like 1x, or I want it to be Retina. That's what the 2x is. And you can say export collections, and then you can just get it wherever you need it to be. But that's pretty typical. And of course, share and feedback. So share is like what I did. You can send anybody a link to anything you've ever made in Figma, and they don't have to have an account. They can just view it. But then if you want them to be able to edit it, they just create an account, and they can do it like that. So questions, again, just quick high-level overview. Again, it's not about sort of here's an in-depth look into everything there is to learn about Figma. It's just I want you to be basically familiar with the tools and what you can do with it, so that I want you guys to actually be using it. And then as you're trying it and running into obstacles, I'll be here to look at it with you together. And that way you guys can try and get a workable prototype by the end. How are we doing on time? OK, good. So any questions, thoughts, feedback so far at this point before we dive into it? Go ahead. Yeah.
Can we use Figma to create website?
Yes. So I'll show you. So like right here, and this, I just have like a black background. You can have any background you want for this guy. So like maybe you're more comfortable with like I made like a gray or something here. I'll just change everything, the whole background. But like let's say, and again, if I zoom way out, I can just put stuff anywhere I want to. So let's say I have a new frame, and a frame is sort of your, do you see how I clicked right here? It looks like sort of like a tic-tac-toe board up here in the top corner. That's your frame tool, and the frame tool you'll use a lot, and that's basically the Figma tutorial like documentation does a better job of describing what it is. But the reason why frames are cool, and they're sort of like an artboard in either Illustrator or Sketch. They're a little different. Like in Sketch or Illustrator, you can't nest artboards within artboards, but you can with frames. But one thing that's fun too, so like if I were to do a new frame here, let's say I click on this button. Do you see over here on the right-hand side? Do you see how under the Design tab, when I have this selected right here, on the right-hand side, it gives me all of these options here for screen sizes. So I could say, yeah, give me an iPhone 8 Plus, and then that's what this is right here. And then I can design for that screen size. Or if I click on this again, I can say, you know what, give me an iPad, give me an iPad Pro 10.5, and that's what that'll look like. But then to your question, if I have frame here, and I say, give me a desktop, and then what do you want? Like my little computer here does 1440 by 1024, but then like a MacBook Pro, Surface Book, iMac all have, of course, different like screen sizes as you'd expect. So for me, I'll just say like MacBook or whatever, and then this is my 1152 by 700. So you can sort of compare. Here's what an iPhone 8 Plus would look like compared to like a full MacBook. And again, just like let's just make some boxes, So let's say here's my logo up here, and then I got my little hamburger menu up here, and I got a couple of, I got my like navigation links, and I'll just take this and duplicate like this, and then I'll duplicate that a few more times. Those are my navigation links, and then I might have like, here's a big photo of my app screenshot, and then I've got like a headline, and then I got some like blurb text, like, oh, you should definitely like buy my product. I have a little button here that says, give me money. I mean, again, it's like that same principle of start with black and white. Just make things really simple and just get your ideas out. And then once you've got your ideas sort of, and you can sort of drill down then and be like, okay, well, this is actually going to be a photo. So let me like drop a photo in here, or this is going to be my logo. So I put a logo in here, and all of a sudden you like have your design. You're just like going through it. It doesn't have to be really complicated. The thing that's nice about frames is I'll just show you here, when you do select a frame, over here there's this option called layout grid. And this is fun too, because that sort of helps you keep things organized. So it gives you like a graph paper kind of grid, which is not that helpful. I much prefer the columns here. And this is sort of more typical if you're familiar with sort of like basic layouts or whatever. And then so you can say I want a 5 count, or like you say, like I want a 6 or a 9 column, and then give me some margins on either side. And then so that way when you're designing, you can sort of make things all line up, like that's this size here, and it'll snap to my little, and this will go like this. And then, within about 10 minutes, you got the New York Times. You're just doing like this, that's all you do. You guys should probably know that most, I was 90% of graphic design is just making stuff line up. You guys have that experience? Yeah, it's just, that's all you're doing. So again, I'm trying on some level to just demystify the idea of screen design. On the one hand, it's really simple. On the other hand, it takes a lifetime to master. Text in particular is especially difficult to design. But yeah, so by all means, just within one Figma file, you could have 10 different screens for your regular website. You could have 100 screens for your mobile app or whatever. And then you can do your little prototype by just highlighting hotspots, clicking them together, and then sending them off. But so that's what we're doing here. So that's where I now want to pause. Let me get back to, where's my little, is it this guy? Where are we next here? Okay, so that's the next thing. Yeah. So I want you guys now, you all have your oh, go ahead, sorry, yeah.
Sure, I just have one question, kind of going back and kind of based off what you said. If you're starting to design a web app that's, can be both mobile and on desktop,
yeah.
Would you recommend starting with desktop design and then bringing it to mobile, or?
I do. I think in general, mobile first is the way to go. And I know that sounds maybe counterintuitive because if you come from a background of designing websites, your mind just goes to here's my laptop or whatever. But I think it was, and I remember because this was a big deal. I was working at agency doing websites work back in 2010, 2011, and that was the point at which I think the 50% mark was crossed as far as mobile traffic. So it used to be 80% of every visitor was on a desktop because that's all there was. I mean, 10 years ago there was no iPhone or whatever, so everything was. But then if you look at the proportions of people, now I think on average, whatever your website is, you can expect 70 to 80% to be on a mobile device. And so I feel like that sort of justifies the investment of time and energy to make that experience first. And the other reason I think that's actually more valuable too is you're sort of forced to really be economical when you only have that much screen real estate. The temptation is just to over design things with too much words and text and buttons and whatever, but to just sort of be okay, I just have one little flow here, and it's what am I doing now? And then click, what am I doing now? What am I looking at? And I think that when you go from that and then grow up, your end result is better than as if you start big and have to cut things away. Do you know what I mean? Because you can always add things, but taking them away is much harder, just for me anyway. And I think conceptually that sort of makes more sense. So that would be my recommendation for sure.
So I'm interested in the workflow from converting a Figma design to actual code. So you mentioned there's some export option. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah.
So looking at some of the Android code it outputs in terms of the XML and
Yeah. How is it?
I don't know. A lot of it is hard coded to specific pixels instead of doing center button, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, that's a really fine question. So I mean, you can see here. So this is CSS, obviously. That's for if you're doing that. But if we're talking Android, I don't honestly know the first thing about Android development. So I can't speak to how good or bad the code is. I would just say your best bet is try it out a little bit, do some exports, and just see how that might save you some time in your workflow. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. Maybe there's some ways where, if like you said, that hard-coded thing, if you can just do a find and replace and swap it for center button, whatever, that kind of thing, that might still be faster. But as far as that's concerned, yeah, it's going to be sort of limited, but it's better than nothing, I guess. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. So you can see, yeah, I've got this here. I'm going to come back to just my sort of drafts area here. So you have workspaces where you can have collections of files, basically. And then you have individual files. And then you can have as many files as you want within a workspace. You just create a new file. But there's just some stuff that I was playing around with, some client work. And then just this is a little sample file folder. But I'll come back to demo here and just show you sort of how this was. But yeah, I want you guys to start just getting a sense of, we're going to come back to our 7 rules here because we only did half of them. But I wanted to just spend some time letting you guys click around your own Figma windows and then just starting the sense of getting what that would look like. You could either create something just for fun that's made up on the spot, or if you guys actually have your own real ideas, it would be kind of fun to just do some gray boxes for your actual app and just see what we can come up with. You can even grab some photos too and throw them in or whatever. Yeah, sure. Other questions so far? just take a look and see, make sure. Oh. So one thing I'll show you too. Do you guys see this up here? This little like white menu bar here. There's something in Figma called components, and that's something that's again very similar to other kinds of design tools. And what I did was I just took this, and it's just some circles. You know, again, if you were to recreate this, it's not rocket science. This is just a couple of circles, and some of them are filled in, and that's just text or whatever. But what I did with this is, once you have some design, like let's say this guy here, or like let's say this text right here, is just text that I wrote. But if I'm going to be reusing it over and over again, I can turn it into a component. And that's what this guy up here is. The center button here says create component. And what that does is then it creates this now as like instances. So this is sort of like a class. And so if I were to copy this and then move it over here, and then I were to change something in it, and I were to say like camping for people who don't like camping is great. Oh, actually I didn't change my, is it not for text? Maybe it's just for images. Oh, that's the instance. Go to master component, yeah. So then if I change the master component, sorry, I had the wrong one. So the actual individual instance here, I can make changes to, and it doesn't affect the master. But if I change the master, then it's supposed to change my, why is that not working? Well, it is changing it like that. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. I think text is probably a bad example. Yeah, like what size do you want?
I just put iPhone 8 for the device.
But you're saying you want a different size than that?
No.
Or what's your question? Sorry.
Like, do I just draw a rectangle or the size and do the right size?
Well, no, if you go, so, well, again, like what's the right size? You want iPhone 8 is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you see this frame button right here? When you click on that, you can just draw any size frame you want, or you can select from this menu here on the right-hand side, and that'll be the right size. Yeah, you got it. Let me show you a better example of this. So this logo here is a component, and this is a child component. And so if I were to like change the color of this, it will change the color of this one. Do you guys see how that just happened? So if I have this white fill and I change the fill to red, then any child component that has that. So like a concrete example of when you do that is like, let's say you have like 1 million buttons. Like here's my login button, and I take this and I bring it over here. Oops. And here's my login button, and it's sort of hard to see because it's white, but I'll change that in a second. So I have this, I just made it, it's just a box with text. And I come up here and I say create component, it turns purple. And then all your components are down here. This little button right here shows you all the different components you have in your file, but I'll go back to the layers. And then now I have this component, so it's like, let's say I have like 1 million login buttons, and they could be like, you know, Lord only knows what kind of stuff they do, but like, and I have them over the course of like 100 different screens. Well, I don't want to have to go through and change every single one of those buttons. So if I have 1 million buttons like this, and I grab the master, and I can change the master to whatever I want, and then automatically the other ones change with it. So watch, I'm going to take this master one here, I'm going to go to the fill, I'm going to make the fill be like blue, and then all the rest are blue, and then the text I can make whatever color I want. So you see, I can just affect the master and then all the child instances. But if I change the size of a child, it doesn't affect the master. But if I change the master, it affects all the children. So that's a way that it's built in, is that when you have like many different screens, you're going to have components that you're reusing over and over and over again. And when you need to make changes to those, you don't want to have to make changes in 1,000 different places. You want to just make a change in one spot. Sketch calls these symbols, of course. Figma calls them components. Yeah, same idea.
Have you used InVision Studio?
I have not. I've used, is Studio the one?
They like just, it's like been in production for a while. They just like open it up to like general, like it's been beta tested for, like they've been in beta with like just companies for like a year and a half, and then they finally launched. But it's a little, they basically were trying to add more like interaction design than Figma.
Yeah.
But it's essentially Sketch. Like they even have the same naming convention.
As Sketch does, yeah.
Because I don't know if you ever use like Craft or anything like
I did,
that.
yeah.
That now doesn't work in Sketch. Sorry, this is like it doesn't work in Sketch anymore.
Because they want people to use Studio, or?
They have some beef now with Sketch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they're competing now in a way they weren't before.
Yeah, I'm just surprised. Like I've like worked at a couple places in like the Bay Area, and I haven't worked at a company yet that uses Figma, but I think it's so powerful.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Have you heard of Macaw? Are you familiar with Macaw?
No.
So there's 3 guys kickstarted. They raised like $200,000. They made what is sort of like this. Never really got traction, but were acquired by Envision. And then 3 years passed. I'm like, whatever happened to those guys? And that's what Studio. Yeah. So I actually used Macaw. I remember like, this is pretty cool, but I just didn't catch on, or maybe they ran out of money or something like that. Or go ahead.
What you just did is you just duplicated and they were automatically made children.
Correct. Yep. You can also, that's one way to do it. And then you see how when I click on it, when you're right here, you have the option. So if you ever lose it, you can just say go to master component, and then it'll take you, that way you won't forget, because there's nothing that distinguishes it from the other ones. Alternatively, if you are over here in the bottom left corner, there's your layers palette, and then to the right of that is your components. So you can also just like go up to this and then just like drag it from here, and that will make another one as well. Yeah, so either way, same way, yeah. But yeah, those are sort of the foundations. So you have different screen sizes. Again, just coming back to the things we talked about from the very beginning. You have different screen sizes. You need to sort of understand how they'll work when you resize things. I'm going to take my little Glamper thing here, and I want you to show you, just so you guys see, I did this exact same thing. It's light blue at the top, dark blue at the bottom, just because light comes from above, light comes from the sky. There's nothing special about it. I just took that idea. I had some rounded corners. If you guys notice here how I made this, I'll zoom in a little. For this email address here, these are just 2 rectangles that I rounded the corners. And you can see how easy it is to round corners. I'll just draw a rectangle that's here. I'll make it white. And then when you click on it, you guys see how there's little circles in the corner there? You guys see that when I hover over this? I can just grab like a rectangle and grab the corners, and I can make a radius out of it. So you can make a little rounded corner, which is sort of fun. And that looks a little bit more like an input box. And then I think input boxes, if you were to actually look at like a website or something, they tend to have these inner shadows, not a drop shadow, but an inner shadow. Yeah, more like that. And then that's sort of hairy looking. So let me like do that. But then, so now I put an inner shadow in it, and then when I back out a little bit, you see how it looks inset? You guys see that a little bit? Just by putting an inner shadow in there. And so again, it's like creates an illusion of depth, and then your brain as a user, anytime you have depth changes, whether inset or offset, it makes you think, oh, this is something I can touch or interact with or whatever. So if things are just like perfectly flat, it is more challenging cognitively to sort of grasp what I'm supposed to do. So that's all I did there. And then I'll just show you. So same thing. So I'm going to take this guy here, and I have constraints. I just centered this, and you can see whenever I center something, it gives me little guides, so I know that it's in the center of my document window there, or my little viewport.
Do you have rulers in Figma?
Yeah, you do. It's in view, forget off the top of my,
Yeah, okay.
there it is, yeah. And then you can, go like that, yeah. Yeah, it's literally Sketch in a browser. I mean, that's the best way. It's unbelievable.
So funny. Like, that's just
But honestly, it's like more performant. Like I haven't upgraded in a while, but like I'll be working and it's like I'm a little spinning beach ball. I'm just like waiting, and then but anyway, it's bananas. So this is pinned by default to top and left because that's how websites work. So you see I have my constraints here for this selected object. And so if I grab the whole frame here, where I click on the title here, login, and you can see I just made that be my name over here. That's just what I named my little group. Whatever, you can name it whatever you want. But I'm going to grab the corner, and you can see because the constraints are pinned to the top and left, then when I resize this window, it's just going to stay. It's going to stay pinned to the top and to the which basically means that it doesn't move at all. But if I were to take it and then say I want it to be left and right, and then top and bottom, then when I resize it, you'll see that it will now move. And it looks like I got scale on it too. That's funny. Did I put scale on it? I'll just say Just say center. And then that way you can sort of test how things look when they resize, like what they'll be. And then the funny thing too is that because this is my master component and this is my child component, then as I click and I move this window around, you can see that I change that and it changes the child component in the top left, which is sort of fun. Another thing that's kind of fun too is that when you click on something, let's see if you can see it. Is it my scale? I suppose I can just do this down here and you guys can see it just as easily. And of course, I'll make this all available to you guys if you want to look at my prototype here. Let's go back a few stages. There's one thing that's really fun too with Figma. This is great because what I did with these guys is these look photos here. We're going to come back to part 2 of the 7 rules, and that's sort of what I wanted to talk about here. But what's kind of cool is that if I have items in a list, and you guys know that when you're designing for iPhone or Android, like things in a list is again like most of what you're designing, whether it's like photos or text or data records or whatever, things in a list is most of what you're designing. But what's really neat with Figma is you see how these little like purple circles came in front of these? Well, I can take them and like rearrange them and they maintain their positions, which is really fun. That's something that, and here, get this. Do you see this little thing in between them? When I grab this, it'll resize all of them at the same time. Which is really fun. And if I can do all 5, you just click, and as soon as you have more than one item selected, then it knows that you want to like use them as a group. So I'll click this guy and then swap. Why is that one not working? Here, let's go like that.
I'm just curious, like, are those grouped or they're not?
They are not grouped. Look here, they're just all by themselves. So they don't even have to be grouped. They just have to be selected at the same time. And then, like I said, I can take this, and then I can, why are you doing this to me? Yeah, as a Sketch user, I can imagine you know how much.
The margin's cool, being able to like switch out the cards.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, if I select all these, then I can take this and move him up to here, to that position, and they maintain their proportions.
How can we start that purple circle?
Yeah, great question. So let's say I have a box here, and then I make a duplicate right here. And then I do, let's say 4, so I just have 4 in a row. So if I just select all 4, that's it.
Okay.
That's all. And then you can see there should be, here's my, oops. And then you should be able to, I'm not getting where's the little thing in the middle here? It's being squirrely, I don't know why. But yeah, you see how it just works like that. And then, yeah, if I were to go like this. Another thing that's fun too is so you can see if I do them and they're like not the right spaces, but I select them, it creates, you see this little thing down here in the corner here? So like the space between this one and this one and this one and this one are all 4 different. But if I grab all 4 and I just click this, it spaces them automatically for me without having to do anything, which is fun. Again, when you're designing, you're just moving boxes. I mean, that's mostly. So there's a couple things I want to point out too. As you guys are going here, you won't have to go like click and stop what you're doing. But when you go to part 2 of that 7 rules, the very first one on that part 2, number 4, is putting text on images. And out of all the 7 rules, he spends the most time on that because that's really hard to do well. And so I want you guys, when you have a chance to go home, read. If you don't read anything else on all those 7 rules, just read that one section, the first part of part 2, number 4. Text on images. It's very hard to do well, but he gives a number of examples, and I actually think I have, let me just see, so I don't have to, let's see here. So I've got, so how to overlay text on images. And there's one thing, there's a couple of things that you'll be doing, and I did the exact same thing in the example that I showed you. And again, if you look at something, you're like, wow, that looks professional, it's because professionals always keep doing the same 3 things. And so once you learn what those are, you can do work that looks professional. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. So the first one he says is that, look, when you have a photo, it's really hard to put text on a photo because there's so much happening in the photo that it interferes with reading. So in the article, he uses this example, and I just grabbed it. And what he did was, he says, I'm going to look and see what did upstart.com do to make that text legible. And he zoomed into the source code. And it turns out that there is just the photo, and then there is a black layer, a solid black rectangle at like 30% opacity, just right on top of that image, and then he has his text. And otherwise, it's much harder to read text without it, and I'll show you. And he gives another example here. This one here, it's both a black one and it's blurred. So this one here blurred it because, again, it's hard to read text when you're competing with the image underneath. And the reason I show you that is because in our other example here, that's why this text is a lot easier to read in the demo. Oops. Close this, come here. In our sample file is because this image here, well, it was blurred, and it's not now. But if I were to click on it and blur it the way that it was, it becomes a lot easier to read with that blur. And that's one of the examples he gives. So you can see that's blurred, that's unblurred, blurred. So putting a layer on it is one thing. And then he also gives this, I'll show you, I did the same thing here. So when I come back to my, wait, is it demo? Yeah. So you'll see here, I want to show you, I'll just take this as an example. I'll copy it and move it over here so you can see. So we're going to zoom in a little bit and just get a better sense of this guy. So I took this image, and here, let me zoom in a little better. And what I've got on here, if you examine my little grouping here, so I've got my text. So you guys see my little group here? I just call it item. So in my frame, I've got the text here, which I can hide. And then I've got this text, and I've got this rectangle. This is my image. So you can see this is the actual photograph that I dropped in there. And then I have this rectangle. And can you guys guess what this rectangle is?
Gradient.
Yeah. So here's just a raw image with white text on it. And it's real hard to read. But I took a rectangle, and I made it transparent at the top and then black at the bottom. And that's one of the examples in that article. He says, you see this, once you recognize it, everywhere you go. Airbnb uses it. Like all of a sudden, again, there's like a handful of tips that like pro designers use to like put text on photos, which is, again, like now we can even go to Airbnb right now and see. I forget what's on what their latest update is, but that's just, again, a good example. And I pulled that right from that article that you guys have. It's number 4. And he gives like 4 or 5 different ways to overlay text. You can get creative with color if you want. I have in my rectangle here, you can see it's a fill here. That's a gradient. And all I did was, if I went to solid, well, then it's going to be black, of course. And then I could just say, OK, let's make this just be like 20% opacity. And then that's still going to be easier to read. And you can see the difference here, because if I hide it, you can see even with just that solid black here, it makes the text pop a little bit. You could also give the text a drop shadow, which will help a little bit as well. And so this is 25% opacity, but I'm going to bump that up to like 75%, so it's a little sharper. And instead of a blur, I'm going to do like a 2 maybe. And then the Y we're going to say is just 1. And that's sort of hard to see from here, but your brain notices. And I'll zoom in. So there's a little bit of a black under the text. Oops, come on. Do you see the black under the text as I move it? And again, it's subtle, but your brain notices. And those are some of the things that make for like much more successful screen design. The last thing I'll show you guys too, just since as you're tooling around here, and we'll keep going, because I want to get to the prototyping so you guys can have your thing ready to go, is masking. Can anybody explain what a mask is? This is probably the last thing that you'll need to understand, because you can write text in a box, you can put gray boxes, you can drop photos, but masking is something that you're going to use all the time when you're doing screen design. And can anybody tell me, maybe a sketch expert in the room can describe what masking is?
I guess like when you're creating, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking like when you're creating like a vector that's a mask and you can drop something in it.
What does it do?
It's like, it's basically like, well, I'm thinking you're talking about like masking.
Like a clipping mask, yeah, right, yeah.
Okay. So like, say you wanted to make like a profile, like a circle, you could like, I don't know how this works like but you could just like have like maybe the square image of your like headshot. You could drop a circle on top and then mask it. And basically, it's like a cookie cutter.
Yeah, exactly. So here I'll show you I'll do a demo of what she's describing. So here we have, I'm going to make a little circle. So I'm going up to my little shape. I'm going to make a circle. I'm going to draw a circle. Oh, and you see I'm holding the shift key. If I hold the shift key, then it maintains a perfect proportion. If I let go of the shift key, then I can do any kind of ellipse that I want. But if I hold the shift, then I can make a perfect circle. And you say, okay, this is great. And let's say I had a photo of a person. So we'll even take this one here. And we will, oops. So that's my image fill. I want to take this. Sorry, I need to look here so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to say, and that's in a mask, I think. So let's say I just have an image. And, you know, obviously when we get photographs, they're never the right size. And then if I said, let's say this was a person's portrait, and I wanted to put that person's face inside of a circle, I could just take the thing I wanted, and I could take the circle, and let's say, for example, that this was like, I just wanted the couple to be in this like circle here. And I can just take this thing and say, use as mask. And then I have to, oops, where is it? I think I have this already in a mask. Where are they? They have to be together. Here we go. So I took the circle, and you can't even see it, but it's a mask now. And if I take this image and I drop it in the mask group, and they have to be, there we go. And I realized that was a terrible demo, but the idea is,
Can you actually, so you could do this in Sketch. I guess it just depends on how like strict you are and what part of the image you want. Is there a way in the fill to drop an image in the fill?
yes. Yeah, you can do the same thing. So if you had this like a square, and then you did my fill, I can do an image fill. And then you can choose, yeah, you just drop it in right there. Yeah, exactly, same way. Yeah, good question. So while you guys are sort of tooling around, so again, overlaying text on images. This is another thing. Again, I'll just go over this in a highlight. You'll have a chance to read that article in more depth later, but just draw your attention to something he talks about with making text pop. And it's sort of a joke because anytime you're doing client work and you show them your result and they give you feedback, they always say, can you just make it pop a little more? It's sort of like a designer's cliche. And what he means by pop is basically contrast. And this is something that all sort of design, whether graphic design like poster design or brochures or screen design or whatever, is sort of an exercise in contrast. And the reason you talk about contrast is because it's sort of what your eye looks at as where one thing begins and another thing ends. And so you see, okay, these things are different and separate, and based on how they're different and separate, my attention is drawn to them. And so when you're talking about text in particular, you really only just have these 5 tools, that's it. So if you want to draw someone's attention to a headline, let's say, versus body copy, or like a small label or caption, or versus you know, like some marketing information or like a brochure that's like 25% off, you make it like really big. Well, obviously size is how you can draw attention. Color, you can draw attention. If you have everything gray and one thing red, your eye will immediately go to that. And there's all kinds of like cognitive psychology principles that underlay some of this, like how we perceive shapes and colors and sizes and like how we react to them. And that makes things easier to use or harder to use. But so size is one, color is one, weight. So if you have fonts and one of them is bold or not bold, well, obviously it's a distinction. And so you can draw someone's attention to it. A lot of this is just sort of marshaling people's attention. Case, and by case I mean like uppercase, lowercase, is one thing, and then spacing. So obviously, the further things apart are, the more you can draw attention to them. And he gives some really, really good examples in this. And this is partly like, again, he's looking at what makes something look professional. So just look at the text here. So a couple things to notice is that a better client experience for this bluehomes.com. Well, obviously the headline is all capital, but within an all caps headline, which itself stands it apart, notice there's one word in the all caps headline that is different than the rest. And which one is that? The word better. And he actually did the reverse. Instead of having all lowercase and one thing in uppercase like you're shouting, he took everything, the designer took everything uppercase, and to draw emphasis, contrast, actually turned it to lowercase, and it's italicized. So 2 different things that make a difference. And you could make it red. That would be 3 things that are different. And you could make it bigger. And that would be 4. So in general, the fewer things you can do to make contrast, the better. Just again, good rule of thumb is just the principle of least difference is what they call it. So it's like, I want to draw attention between it. If they're too similar, I can't tell them apart. But if they're like too different, then it like overwhelms me. So that's a good example. He gives several in his article. Use good fonts. I'm not going to go into this too much, but he basically gives you like 3 or 4 suggestions. Just pick one, like Work Sans or Roboto, and just always use that. It makes life so much easier. You don't have to think too much about it. One thing I will show you too here is this feather icons. He mentions this, and this is sort of fun. So if you guys just want some ready-made icons that you can drop into your design, like icon design is very hard, but you can take these, and they're just SVGs, so they're image files that you can drag into your Figma, and you automatically have them available to you for doing your design work. So if I wanted to have like user or like map or something, like where's map? C, D, E, F, G, M, map. Where is map? Oh, map. So like map pin. So this kind of thing, like, you just use all the time. So I just clicked, downloaded it. So I've got it in my downloads, and then I'll see it right here. And then it should be map pin SVG. I'm going to drag it into my Figma, and there it is. So now I've got my little map pin that I can use. And then the stroke here, it's black, but I want to use blue because that's my brand color or whatever. Turn this blue, stroke, blue. And then now I've got this, and if you want to then put this in your design, and you say, hey, these guys, this is located in fact, I think I used this exact one on my, oh yeah, there it is. You guys see it? Look, I'll use it right there. So when you put this in here, it makes that design like that. But yeah, so that's a fun way, and he mentions that, so I got that from the article. And then the last thing, again, while you guys are still working, I just want to show you this. Steal like an artist. That was his number 7, and it's sort of like a joke, like steal like an artist. And what this means is that I think, and I'll tell you guys, it's okay to take someone else's design and to recreate it, not to use for your own and claim that it's your own. But there's a tendency in the design community to avoid. You don't want to do like plagiarism, obviously, but on some level, you have to just become a better designer. And the way you become a better designer is by practice. And the best way to practice is take the things that are really good and just try to remake them. It's really no different than if you were like an artist and you're a kid. Like I used to take comic books and I try to like draw the comic books just to like teach me this is how an arm looks or whatever. Or if you're a musician and you want to learn to play, well, you're going to play other people's music, and you might go years playing other people's music before you start to write your own original, because you just have to like absorb it and understand it and like get a feel for what makes a good song. And I guarantee you, if you take some user interface, some screen design that you like and you think is amazing, and you try to recreate it in Figma, do that like 2 or 3 times, and just that right there is going to give you an education and excellent design, because it's almost like taking like Shakespeare or like taking The Great Gatsby or something and just like writing the words just to get the feel of how those words follow one after another, and it teaches you how like dialogue should sound, things like this, just by recreating designs. And so he says steal like an artist, and it's a way that you can practice and just become a better designer, and there's no shame in it at all. Now, of course, you don't want to do Airbnb, swap out the logo for yours and publish it and try to say this is my new app. Of course, you're not going to do that. But there's no shame in using that as a way to teach yourself how to be a better designer. And so, yeah, it's just like you're practicing, you're learning songs like Beatles songs. I had a buddy in high school, and he wanted to learn to play the bass guitar. And so he took the very first Beatles album and learned all Paul McCartney's parts. And Paul wasn't necessarily like a really good bass player, so they were like pretty easy. But then the next album, like Paul became a better bass player, and so he learned all those. And so he went the entire Beatles catalog, and as Paul McCartney became a better bass player, my friend became a better bass player too. So it's a similar idea. That's what you're doing. So now, in the moments we have left, I'm going to just show you some of the basics about prototyping again. And I'm going to come around and look. We still have 30 minutes here, so I want you guys all to have a clickable prototype before we go. That's your goal. And I'll just show you what I did on mine here, just for the demonstration's sake. I'm going to delete some of the stuff that we don't need. We don't need our rulers. That's okay. So I just made this little box, this login box here. And then I came over to prototype. And it says, where do you want it to go? And I said, I want you to click it. Because obviously you can do other things too. You can say, well, is it a click that causes you to go from this screen to this screen? Or is it just you hover over it with your mouse and maybe something flips around or changes color? These are the different things while pressing. So just when you click, before you've let go of your click, I would say nine times out of 10, you're going to say on click or on tap is the equivalent, obviously, for an iOS or like mobile design or whatever. You say on click, and then it says where do you want it to go? And I said I want it to go to this page home, because each of these little frames, detail, home, they're named. So when I click on login and it says where do you want it to go, I want it to go home. But if I change this from home to something else, I could go to anything else in the whole document when I click on this. And it goes like that. So that's all, just goes right here. And then same deal here. When I click on this guy, I want it to go back. And so it says on click, I want you to log in. And then I do want to see, you want to see this here. And there's one point too, I'll show you too, just that I did this. You'll notice that I have these images, they fall outside of my frame. Like, see how they come outside the white here? Well, so I have this option here, overflow behavior. What do you want this to do if you have images that are too long? Because any design you have, you're going to be like scrolling or whatever. Well, you can say, I want to enable vertical scrolling. If I turn this off and say none, then when I go to present, you'll see that I can't scroll anymore. So I'm trying to scroll and nothing's happening. And I'll go back, click on login. It takes me here. There's no scrolling here. But if I close this and go back and say overflow behavior, I want this to do vertical scrolling, then now when I click presentation mode, then when I scroll, you can see I get the behavior here. And then this guy right here I'll show you. So I just did this little overlay. I'll show you how I did that. So I close this. So same deal. I just made three little bars. For like my little hamburger menu. And then when you click on this, oops. There we go. So it's got this thing here where what I did was I said on click, I want it to do menu, but I don't want it to go there, navigate. I want it to be an overlay. So I said I want it to be an overlay. And then you can say, how do you want to position it? You could just say centered or something like that. And so now when I have this and it jumps over to this menu, I set it to centered, and you'll see what that looks like in a second. So I'll come back to presentation view, and I'll click, and it just centers in my document right here. And I can click that to close. And so you'll see again, click this guy, and I have it say centered, but I changed it to manual, and then it says, okay, well, where do you want to put it? And I said I want it to be right in that corner so it looks like it's right there. And then I say OK. And then now when I do presentation mode again, and I click on it, it just appears, oops, I log in. It just appears like that. And it does a little fade too, because I did it like this, where when I clicked on it, I have the option here, transition dissolve. So I have it set to dissolve, which is like a little fade. And then if I do instant, then you'll see how that looks different as well. It won't do a little fade, it'll just appear and disappear. It's sort of jarring though, so it's like, you see how it just appears, but there's no fade? That's not as cool. But yeah, so that's it. So just when you pick your element, and then you come over to prototype, and you say, okay, on trigger, I say on click, and I want it to go to this place. I want it to go to logo or whatever, and then you see that I have this little, I think it's going to take me to here. And so if I actually do that, it's going to be sort of silly. Click here, yoink, and it just took me to my little logo image there, which is sort of silly. But yeah, that's the basics of prototype. There's more to it, but honestly, it's that's it. I mean, that's real fun. Go ahead, yeah. That play, like background images, or like background video. I don't know. I've never actually tried that. I know, I mean, obviously images I have in the document, but you're saying like you have like a window and it's like actual.
Yeah, like stock photo kind of, or stock video kind of.
Right. I don't think you can do that, which is too bad. But so I mean, again, it's more of like a prototype. It's like when you send it to someone, you say, imagine that that's a video. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you can actually just grab these and say this little arrow here, I'm going to move it over here, or I'm going to move it over here, or I'm going to move it over here. And those are the connections between your frames there. But yeah, just type some text or some images. You guys know if you're looking for like fancy images, you guys heard of Unsplash? Does anybody know Unsplash? Callie, I know you know Unsplash. So if you wanted to do, you guys need some like, I don't know, people in coffee shops or like ethnically diverse meeting rooms, people in suits or something, you can find all kinds of cool stuff here. So like let's say this guy, I'm going to download this and then I'm going to go to Figma and I'm going to go to my download folder and I got this, and these things are gigantic. They're like high res. In fact, I'm going to make that smaller just because it's going to really adjust size. And we do not need it to be quite so large. So we'll say 1,000. And then we'll just drag this in to, here we go. So this could be your, this could be like your cool, maybe it's like take off with my app or something, like some kind of goofy, let's do text here. So if I want to do text, that thing is so big. Yeah, let's go like this. And I say, okay, let's do text. Why can't I see that? Oh, there it is. Oh, it's so small. Let's make our text a little bigger. Let's go up to 36. There we go. And we say, my cool app. And you say, oh, this is hard to read, so let's make it white. And you say, oh, that's sort of still hard to read. And you could say, like, sign up now. And then we'll say, bring that to front. Where's my arrange? That's too hard to do. Oh, they're in a little group here. And I could say my cool app, and let's get this login button here. And we'll say this guy, and we'll say prototype, and we'll say on click, I want you to go to login over here. So then I say, okay. Hey, where's my other one? Let's do that instead. Oh, it needs to be a frame. That's what it is. It's too hard to do. Yeah, good idea. Okay. I'm just doing some live demos. How's it coming? How's it coming? Oh, that's lovely. Nice work.
Before anybody leaves, make sure you fill out the survey up here.
All right, but up here as well.
There's a $50 raffle. So it's worth your time to fill that out.
I have that as well.